I opened my eyes to sterile white walls and the steady beep of machines I couldn't recognize. The hospital room felt empty, hollow, like a tomb that had been sealed and forgotten. My throat burned when I tried to speak, my voice coming out as nothing more than a rasp. I looked around desperately for familiar faces, for my father, Frank, for my stepmother, Diana, for my half-siblings, Jake and Sarah. The bedside table held only wilted flowers and a crumpled piece of paper that made my blood run cold when I read it. "Carson, we stopped paying your bills. Insurance ran out. Good luck, Dad." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. The tears came without warning, flowing down my cheeks as I stared at that devastating note. 3 months. I had been unconscious for 3 months, and my family had simply walked away when the money ran out. The machines around me had been disconnected, leaving only the most basic life support. Even the flowers had been dead for weeks, their petals brown and crumbling on the windowsill. I sobbed uncontrollably, my body shaking with each breath. The abandonment cut deeper than any physical pain I had ever experienced. These were the people who had raised me, who I had called family for 25 years. Frank had taught me to ride a bicycle, had cheered at my high school graduation, had walked me through my first job interview. Diana had made me birthday cakes and tucked me in when I was sick. Jake and Sarah were my siblings, the ones I had protected from bullies and helped with homework. Now they were gone, and I was alone in a hospital bed with nothing but a cruel note explaining their betrayal. The door opened as I wiped my eyes, and 2 men in expensive suits entered. The first was tall and distinguished with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The second was younger, impeccably dressed, with an air of authority that commanded attention. They moved with purpose, like men who were used to being in control of important situations. "Carson Mitchell." The older man said, his voice warm but professional. "My name is Walter Sterling. I'm an attorney with Sterling Blackwood and Associates. This is Marcus Whitfield, executor of the Whitfield Trust." I stared at them blankly, assuming they were here about medical bills or some kind of legal trouble from my accident. "I don't understand," I managed to say through my hoarse throat. "I don't have any money. My family left me here to die." Walter's expression grew somber as he pulled out a leather briefcase. "Mr. Mitchell, I've been searching for you for the past 4 months. According to the hospital records, you were pronounced dead 6 weeks ago." "What?" The words made no sense. I was obviously alive, sitting right in front of them. Marcus stepped forward, studying my face intently. He pulled out an old photograph and compared it to my features. "Carson," he said quietly, "what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about yourself." Walter opened his briefcase and withdrew a stack of legal documents. "Your hospital records show that you died from complications related to your accident. Your family signed the death certificate and had your body released to a funeral home. Except there was no body because you were very much alive." The room began to spin as I processed this information. They told people I was dead. More than that, Marcus said, his voice growing cold. They falsified the documentation to avoid paying your medical bills. But Carson, there's something much more important you need to understand. The people who raised you aren't your biological family. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. "What are you talking about?" Walter sat down beside my bed, his expression gentle but serious. 25 years ago, a young woman named Emma Whitfield gave birth to a son. She was the heiress to one of the largest pharmaceutical empires in the country, worth over $900 million. But Emma's family was dangerous, filled with people who would do anything to control that fortune. Emma knew her life was in danger, Marcus continued. She arranged for her newborn son to be placed in witness protection, raised by a family who would keep him safe and hidden until he came of age. That child was you, Carson. The words hit me like a physical blow. Everything I had believed about my identity was crumbling around me. That's impossible. Frank and Diana adopted me when I was a baby. They've been my parents my entire life. They were paid to protect you, Walter said softly. Frank Mitchell received $50,000 every year to keep you safe and hidden. He knew exactly who you were, but he was supposed to take that secret to his grave. I stared at the photograph Marcus was holding. It showed a beautiful woman with dark hair and eyes that looked remarkably like mine. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, holding a baby with the same distinctive features. "This is your mother, Emma Whitfield," Marcus explained. "She died in a car accident when you were 6 months old, but not before she set up legal protections for you. She established a trust that would activate on your 25th birthday, giving you control of the Whitfield fortune and the pharmaceutical company." My 25th birthday was 3 months ago. I whispered, the timeline beginning to make horrifying sense. "Exactly," Walter said. "While you were in this coma fighting for your life, you officially became one of the wealthiest men in America. You inherited everything Emma left behind, including controlling interest in Whitfield Pharmaceutical's real estate holdings across the country and liquid assets totaling $987 million. The number was so large it didn't feel real. I had grown up in a modest house in suburban Cleveland, wearing secondhand clothes and eating generic cereal. The idea that I was worth nearly $1 billion seemed like something out of a movie. But if this is true," I said slowly, "why did Frank abandon me? Why would he throw away $50,000 a year?" Marcus and Walter exchanged a dark look. "Because someone offered him much more than that to disappear," Marcus replied grimly. "Carson, your accident wasn't an accident at all." The hospital room felt like it was closing in around me as Walter opened another folder, this one containing photographs and police reports that would shatter what remained of my innocent worldview. Marcus pulled up a chair, his expression grave as he prepared to deliver information that would change everything. "Your cousin Derek Whitfield stands to inherit the entire Whitfield fortune if you die without an heir." Walter began spreading out documents across my bed table. Emma's will was very specific about the line of succession. If something happened to you before your 25th birthday, or if you died without children, everything would go to the next Whitfield bloodline. I studied the photographs Walter had laid out. Derek was a man in his early 30s with sharp features and cold eyes. Even in the professional headshots, there was something predatory about his expression that made me uncomfortable. "Derek has been systematically eliminating potential heirs to the Whitfield fortune for the past 5 years," Marcus continued. "Your cousin Patricia died in a skiing accident in Colorado. Her brother Timothy drowned during a sailing trip in the Bahamas. Another cousin, Michael, died in a house fire in Oregon. All of them died before they could legally claim their inheritance." The pattern was chilling, but I still couldn't believe that someone would actually murder family members for money. "You're saying Derek has been killing people?" "We're saying the evidence strongly suggests it," Walter replied carefully. "And 3 months ago, it was your turn." He pulled out a traffic accident report and security camera footage on a tablet. The video showed my Honda Civic driving through an intersection in downtown Cleveland when a black SUV ran a red light and slammed into my driver's side door at full speed. The impact sent my car spinning across 4 lanes of traffic before it crashed into a concrete barrier. The SUV was stolen, Marcus explained as I watched my near-death experience play out on the screen. The driver fled on foot and was never caught. But here's what's interesting. Walter pointed to another photograph showing the black SUV parked outside a downtown hotel 2 hours before the accident. This vehicle was seen at the Marriott downtown, where Derek Whitfield was staying for a business conference. He checked out 30 minutes after your accident occurred. The evidence was compelling, but I needed more than circumstantial connections. What does this have to do with Frank and my family abandoning me? Everything. Marcus said, his voice filled with disgust. 2 days after your accident, Derek visited Frank at your house. Our private investigator obtained security footage from your neighbor's doorbell camera. The tablet screen showed Derek Whitfield standing on the front porch of the house where I had grown up speaking with Frank. Even without audio, their body language suggested a serious business transaction. Derek handed Frank an envelope, and Frank counted what appeared to be cash before shaking Derek's hand. Frank received $500,000 to disappear and let you die in that hospital. Walter continued. Derek needed you declared legally dead to claim his inheritance, but he couldn't risk being connected to your murder. So he paid Frank to abandon you and falsify the death certificate. I felt nauseous as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. Frank knew someone tried to kill me, and he took money to let me die. Worse than that, Marcus replied. Frank had been receiving his annual payments from the Whitfield Trust through a law firm in New York. He knew exactly who you were and how much you were worth. When Derek offered him $500,000 to walk away, Frank saw it as a retirement package. Walter showed me bank records documenting the $50,000 annual payments to Frank Mitchell, dating back 25 years. Every January, like clockwork, the money had been deposited into his account. He had been paid over $1 million to protect me, and he had thrown it all away for a slightly larger lump sum. Your stepmother Diana and siblings Jake and Sarah were also aware of the arrangement, Marcus added. Our investigation shows they used Derek's payment to take a luxury vacation in Hawaii, while you were fighting for your life in this hospital bed. The photographs from their Hawaiian vacation were like salt in an open wound. Jake and Sarah playing on the beach, Diana getting spa treatments, Frank drinking Mai Tais by the pool. All while I lay unconscious and abandoned, supposedly dead to the world. How long have they been gone? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. They left Cleveland the day after Derek paid them, Walter replied. They've been living it up in paradise for the past 10 weeks, while the hospital tried to figure out what to do with your body. I stared at the legal documents spread across my bed, trying to process the magnitude of what I was learning. My entire life had been a carefully constructed lie. The people I had called family were nothing more than paid guardians, who had ultimately betrayed me for money. My real mother was a woman I had never known, and my real family was a pharmaceutical empire worth nearly $1 billion. The good news, Marcus said, is that we can prove everything. Derek's plan failed because he underestimated how thoroughly Emma had protected you. She left detailed instructions with our law firm about what to do if anything ever happened to you. We have DNA evidence confirming your identity, legal documents establishing your inheritance rights, and enough evidence to prosecute Derek for attempted murder. Walter leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. Carson, you need to understand that you're still in danger. Derek doesn't know that we've found you or that his plan failed. As far as he's concerned, you're dead, and he's about to inherit $987 million. What happens now? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of the situation. Now we take back what's rightfully yours, Marcus replied with a smile that was equal parts warm and predatory. And we make sure that everyone who betrayed you faces the consequences of their actions. Recovery became my new full-time job as Walter arranged for me to be transferred to a private medical facility outside the city. The luxury was overwhelming after months in the understaffed county hospital. Private nurses checked on me every hour, specialists consulted on my rehabilitation, and physical therapists worked with me to rebuild the strength I had lost during my coma. But it was the emotional healing that proved most challenging. Every day brought new revelations about the depth of Frank's betrayal and Derek's criminal conspiracy. Walter's investigators uncovered financial records showing that Frank had been skimming money from my trust fund for years, using my inheritance to fund home improvements and luxury purchases that I had never questioned. The house I had grown up in, the one Frank claimed he could barely afford on his mechanic's salary, had been purchased with my money. The family vacations to Florida, the new cars every few years, Jake and Sarah's expensive private school tuition, all of it had been paid for with funds that belonged to me. 3 weeks into my recovery, as I was working with a physical therapist to regain full mobility in my left leg, Walter burst into my room with an expression of barely contained fury. "They're back," he said without preamble. "Who's back?" "Frank and his family. Word got out about your inheritance somehow, and now they're claiming they never left your side." I sat up straighter on the therapy table, my mind racing. How did they find out? We're investigating the leak, but right now we need to decide how to handle this situation. They're downstairs in the lobby demanding to see you, claiming to be your loving family who has been worried sick. The audacity was breathtaking. After abandoning me to die and spending 3 months living off Derek's blood money, they had the nerve to show up pretending nothing had happened. I want to see them, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. Walter raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's wise? We have enough evidence to have them arrested right now. I need to hear what they have to say. I need to understand how they can possibly justify what they did. Walter nodded slowly. All right, but we're going to record everything, and Marcus will be there with additional security in case things get ugly. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a private conference room when Frank walked through the door carrying a bouquet of fresh roses. Behind him came Diana, Jake, and Sarah, all wearing expressions of concern that would have been convincing if I hadn't known the truth. Carson. Diana rushed toward me with tears in her eyes, wrapping me in a hug that felt like being embraced by a snake. Thank God you're alive. We were so scared we had lost you forever. Frank approached more cautiously, his eyes scanning the room and taking note of Walter and Marcus sitting at the far end of the conference table. Son, I can't tell you how relieved we are to see you awake and recovering. The word son made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to smile. Where have you been? I woke up alone in that hospital room. We were handling business affairs, Jake said quickly, stepping forward with his own forced smile. Making sure everything was taken care of while you were unconscious. We never left the city. Sarah added, her voice quavering with fake emotion. We've been staying at a hotel nearby, visiting you every day. The nurses must have stepped out when you woke up. The lies came so easily that I almost admired their audacity. If I hadn't seen the photographs from their Hawaiian vacation, if I hadn't known about Derek's payment, I might have believed them. We brought you flowers, Diana said, placing the roses on the table beside me. Your favorites. Roses had never been my favorite flowers. She didn't even know that much about me after 25 years. The important thing is that you're going to be fine, Frank said, his tone becoming more businesslike. And now that you're awake, we can take you home and give you the proper care you deserve. There it was, the real reason for their return. They wanted to get me away from Walter and Marcus, away from the lawyers and investigators who knew the truth about my inheritance. I appreciate that, I said carefully, but I'm curious about something. The hospital said my bills weren't being paid. There was a note saying the insurance had run out. Frank's face flushed slightly, but his expression remained steady. That was just a misunderstanding with the insurance company. You know how these bureaucratic mix-ups can get complicated. We sorted it all out. We were so worried about you, Diana added. We've been crying ourselves to sleep every night praying for you to wake up. I looked at Sarah, who was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, despite the absence of any actual tears. It must have been hard for you staying in a hotel all this time. It was terrible, she replied. But we couldn't bear to leave you alone. Family sticks together no matter what. The word family hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. These people had taken money to let me die, had falsified legal documents declaring me dead, had celebrated my supposed demise with tropical drinks and beach volleyball. I'm grateful you came back. I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. But I think I need some time to process everything that's happened. This has all been very overwhelming. Frank's eyes narrowed slightly, and I could see him trying to read between the lines of what I was saying. Of course, son. But remember, we're your family. We love you, and we want what's best for you. We should take you home as soon as possible, Diana added. This place is so sterile and cold. You need to be surrounded by people who care about you. The doctors say I need at least another week of physical therapy, I replied. But we can definitely talk about the future once I'm fully recovered. Frank nodded, but his expression remained cautious. Just remember, Carson, that there are people in this world who might try to take advantage of your situation. People who might claim to be helping you when they really have their own agenda. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He was warning me about the exact thing he had been doing for my entire life.
I'll keep that in mind, I said, standing up to signal that the visit was over. Thank you for coming to see me.
They filed out reluctantly, with Diana giving me another theatrical hug and promising to return the next day. Frank lingered for a moment, studying my face, as if trying to determine how much I actually knew.
We love you, son, he said one final time. Don't forget that.
After they left, Walter turned to me with a grim expression. They're planning something. That whole performance was designed to get you isolated so they can manipulate the situation. I know, I replied, feeling a cold determination settling in my chest. But now I understand exactly what kind of people they really are. And I have a plan for how we're going to handle this. The recording devices Walter had hidden throughout the conference room captured more than just lies and manipulation. In the 20 minutes after they thought they had left the building, Frank's family gathered in the parking lot for a conversation that revealed the true depths of their betrayal. He knows something, Frank told Diana as she lit a cigarette with shaking hands. The way he was looking at us, the questions he was asking. Someone's been talking to him.
Maybe we should have stayed in Hawaii longer, Jake muttered, kicking at the gravel beneath his feet. Given this whole thing more time to blow over.
There's no blowing this over, Sarah snapped. We're talking about almost $1 billion. Do you have any idea what that kind of money could do for us? Diana took a long drag from her cigarette. Derek said this would be simple. Carson dies, we disappear, everyone wins. He didn't say anything about lawyers and private investigators. The conversation confirmed everything Walter and Marcus had suspected, but it was what Frank said next that truly chilled my blood.
Derek's been planning this for years, Frank continued. Carson wasn't the first one, and if we mess this up, we won't be the last ones to disappear.
Walter paused the recording and looked at me with grave concern. Carson, I think it's time you understood the full scope of what Derek Whitfield has been doing. Marcus opened a new folder, this one containing photographs and documentation that painted a picture of systematic murder spanning nearly a decade. Patricia Whitfield had been skiing alone at Vail when an avalanche buried her lodge. The official report blamed climate change and unstable snow conditions, but the timing was suspicious. She had been scheduled to meet with lawyers about her inheritance the following week. Timothy Whitfield's sailing accident in the Bahamas had been attributed to sudden weather changes, but weather records showed calm conditions on the day he disappeared. His yacht was found 3 days later, drifting empty with no sign of struggle or distress signals. Michael Whitfield's house fire in Oregon had been blamed on faulty electrical wiring, but the insurance investigation found traces of accelerant in multiple locations. By the time the evidence was discovered, Michael was already dead, and Derek had inherited his portion of a smaller family trust. Derek's been eliminating competition for the Whitfield fortune for years, Walter explained. But your inheritance is the big prize. $987 million plus controlling interest in a pharmaceutical company that generates billions in annual revenue. The financial reports Marcus showed me were staggering. Whitfield Pharmaceuticals held patents on treatments for diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. Their research division was developing breakthrough therapies that could revolutionize medicine. Owning this company didn't just mean wealth. It meant controlling technologies that could save millions of lives. There's more, Marcus said grimly. Our investigation into Derek's activities uncovered evidence of embezzlement from the company. He's been selling proprietary research to competitors and skimming money from research grants. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed regular deposits from competing pharmaceutical companies. Email correspondences revealed Derek selling confidential formulas and research data. Financial audits demonstrated that over $50 million had been diverted from legitimate research projects into Derek's personal accounts. He's been systematically looting the company while eliminating anyone who could stop him, Walter continued. Your inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about preventing Derek from destroying everything your mother built. I studied the photographs of my murdered cousins, feeling a mixture of grief for family members I had never known and rage at the man who had killed them. How did Frank get involved in all this? Derek approached him 2 years ago. Marcus replied, opening another file. Initially, it was just about information. Derek paid Frank to keep tabs on your health, your activities, your plans. Frank reported back regularly about your life and habits. The surveillance reports were detailed and invasive. Derek knew about my job at the marketing firm, my apartment in downtown Cleveland, my dating history, even my medical records. Frank had been spying on me for years, documenting everything and selling the information to a man who was planning my murder. The car accident was carefully planned, Walter explained. Derek knew your route to work, knew your schedule, knew exactly where to stage the collision for maximum damage. If you had died on impact, this whole conspiracy would have worked perfectly. But I didn't die, I said, feeling a spark of pride despite everything I had learned. No, you didn't, and that's when Frank's true character revealed itself. Marcus pulled out hospital records showing the progression of my medical care. For the first month, Frank had visited regularly and ensured I received proper treatment. The bills were being paid through my trust fund, and my prognosis was gradually improving. Then Derek made his offer. Walter continued. $500,000 to walk away and let you die. Frank didn't hesitate. He signed falsified paperwork declaring you dead, stopped all medical payments, and took his family on a luxury vacation while you fought for your life. The betrayal cut deeper than the attempted murder. Derek was a stranger motivated by greed, but Frank was supposed to be my father. He had raised me, taught me right from wrong, shown me what it meant to be a man. And when the moment came to choose between money and my life, he chose money without hesitation. There's something else you need to know, Marcus said, his voice becoming even more serious. Derek's not finished. Our surveillance team spotted him in Cleveland yesterday. He knows his plan failed and he's looking for a way to finish what he started. Walter opened his laptop and showed me security footage from downtown Cleveland. Derek Whitfield was meeting with two men outside a warehouse, handing them an envelope and pointing to photographs. Even from a distance, it was clear they were discussing another attempt on my life. Who are those men? I asked. Professional criminals, Marcus replied. The kind of people who specialize in making murders look like accidents or random crimes. Derek's escalating because he knows we're closing in on him. The weight of the situation settled on my shoulders. I was a target for professional killers, while the people I had called family plotted to exploit my survival for their own benefit. Everyone I had trusted had betrayed me, and everyone I had never met was trying to kill me. What do we do now? I asked. Walter and Marcus exchanged a look that told me they had been planning this moment for weeks. Now we go on the offensive, Walter replied with a predatory smile. Derek wants to play deadly games for $1 billion prize. It's time to show him what happens when the real heir to the Whitfield fortune decides to fight back. The Whitfield estate boardroom was a monument to pharmaceutical power, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago, and a conference table large enough to seat 30 people. Oil portraits of Whitfield patriarchs lined the walls, their stern faces watching over decades of business decisions that had built the family empire. Marcus had arranged for the meeting under the pretense of a family gathering to discuss my miraculous recovery. Frank and his family arrived in a rented luxury sedan, clearly trying to project an image of success and belonging. Diana wore a new dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and Jake and Sarah had invested in expensive haircuts and designer clothes. They entered the boardroom with expressions of nervous excitement, like children who had been promised Christmas presents, but weren't sure they'd been good enough to deserve them. The opulence of the room clearly impressed them. Diana kept touching the leather chairs and commenting on the crystal chandelier, while Jake took pictures with his phone until Frank told him to stop. This is incredible, Sarah whispered as they took their seats around the massive table. Carson, can you believe this is your inheritance? I sat at the head of the table, flanked by Walter and Marcus, with a stack of legal documents arranged in front of me. Security cameras captured every angle of the room, and additional recording devices ensured we would have clear audio of everything that was said. Before we begin, I announced, my voice carrying across the room with an authority I didn't know I possessed. I think it's important that everyone understands the situation we're dealing with. Frank leaned forward eagerly, his eyes fixed on the documents. Of course, son. We're here to support you in whatever way we can. Walter opened the first folder and began laying out photographs across the table. Hospital abandonment forms, falsified death certificates, bank records showing Derek's payment to Frank's security footage from their Hawaiian vacation. Each piece of evidence landed on the mahogany surface like a physical blow. These documents tell an interesting story about the past 3 months, Walter said calmly. They show a family that abandoned their loved one to die alone while they celebrated his supposed death with tropical drinks and beach volleyball. Diana's face went pale as she recognized the vacation photographs. Jake and Sarah stared at the evidence in stunned silence, clearly unprepared for the thoroughness of our investigation. I don't understand, Frank said, but his voice lacked conviction. There must be some mistake. Marcus placed the audio transcript from their parking lot conversation on the table. Is there a mistake in this transcript where you discuss Derek Whitfield's plan to kill Carson? Where you admit to taking money in exchange for letting him die? The color drained from Frank's face as he realized the scope of what we had uncovered. His carefully constructed facade began cracking as the weight of evidence mounted against him. You don't understand the situation we were in, Diana said desperately. Derek threatened us. He said terrible things would happen to our family if we didn't cooperate. Threatened you? I asked, my voice ice cold. Is that why you spent his blood money on massages and room service in Hawaii? Sarah started crying, but they were tears of panic rather than genuine remorse. Carson, we never wanted any of this to happen. We love you. You're our family. Family. I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. Let me tell you what I've learned about family over the past few weeks. Walter activated a laptop connected to the room's presentation screen, and images of Patricia Timothy and Michael Whitfield appeared. These are my actual family members, my cousins who were murdered by Derek Whitfield in his quest to steal my inheritance. I stood and walked around the table, my voice growing stronger with each step. Patricia was 28 years old when Derek arranged her avalanche. Timothy was 31 when his yacht mysteriously sank in calm seas. Michael was 26 when his house burned down with accelerant poured throughout the structure. Frank's family stared at the photographs in horror as the full scope of Derek's crimes became clear. Derek has been systematically murdering Whitfield heirs for years, I continued. And when it came time to kill me, he recruited you, Frank, to help him finish the job. We didn't know about the murders, Jake protested. Derek just said you had money coming to you, and that we could share in it if we cooperated. Marcus laughed coldly. You didn't ask questions when a stranger offered you $500,000 to abandon your son on his deathbed. You just took the money and left for Hawaii. It wasn't like that, Diana insisted, but her voice was weak and unconvincing. Then tell me what it was like, I said, returning to my seat at the head of the table. Explain to me how you justify taking money from a murderer to let me die alone. The silence stretched for long minutes as Frank's family struggled to find words that could possibly justify their actions. Finally, Frank spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. The money Derek offered us was more than I could make in 10 years. We thought you were going to die anyway from your injuries. At least this way we could secure our future. The casual admission of his willingness to let me die for money was stunning in its honesty. There was no remorse, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a cold calculation that my life was worth less than his financial security. You thought I was going to die, I repeated. So you decided to help that process along by cutting off my medical care. We didn't cut off anything, Frank protested. The insurance really was running out. Walter placed additional documents on the table. These are the insurance records, Frank.
Carson's trust fund was paying for premium medical coverage that wouldn't have expired for another 6 months. You falsified the abandonment paperwork to stop his care.
Sarah was sobbing openly now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. Carson, please, we made a mistake. We were scared and confused, and Derek was pressuring us. You were scared, I said, feeling the rage building inside me. I was unconscious and dying while you were drinking Mai Tais and getting spa treatments. I activated my own laptop and pulled up additional surveillance footage that Marcus's team had gathered. This is Derek Whitfield meeting with hired killers 2 days ago. He's planning to finish what the car accident started because he knows his original plan failed. The video showed Derek handing an envelope to 2 dangerous-looking men outside a warehouse, pointing to photographs and making throat-cutting gestures. Even Frank's family could see that this was a man arranging a murder. Derek is going to try to kill me again, I continued. And when he does, he's going to eliminate anyone who can connect him to his crimes. That includes all of you. Frank's face went white as he processed this information. What are you saying? I'm saying you took money from a serial killer who has no intention of letting you live to spend it, Marcus replied grimly. You're witnesses to his crimes now, loose ends that need to be tied up. The reality of their situation was beginning to dawn on Frank's family. They had thought they were getting easy money for a simple betrayal, but they had actually made themselves accessories to murder and targets for elimination. What do we do? Diana asked, her voice breaking with terror. I stood again, feeling the full weight of my inheritance and the power it represented. You're going to face the consequences of your choices, all of you. Walter opened the final folder and placed federal arrest warrants on the table. Frank Mitchell, Diana Mitchell, Jake Mitchell, and Sarah Mitchell, you are all under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder fraud and violation of federal patient protection laws. Security officers entered the boardroom from multiple doors, their badges clearly visible as they approached Frank's family. The look of shock and betrayal on their faces was almost satisfying, but not quite enough to balance the scales of what they had done to me. Carson, please, Frank begged as the handcuffs were placed around his wrists. We can fix this. We can make it right. You had 25 years to make it right. I replied, my voice steady and cold. You chose money over love every single time. Now you get to live with the consequences. The arrest of Frank's family was just the opening move in a carefully orchestrated campaign that would reshape the Whitfield empire and deliver justice to everyone who had betrayed me. As federal agents led them away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of closure beginning to take root in the place where anger and hurt had been festering for weeks. Walter's legal team had been working around the clock to prepare multiple prosecutions simultaneously. Derek Whitfield would face federal murder charges in connection with Patricia Timothy and Michael's deaths, plus attempted murder for the car accident that nearly killed me. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, surveillance footage, witness testimony, and forensic analysis that connected him to each crime. Frank and his family faced conspiracy charges that carried serious prison time. Their cooperation in Derek's murder plot, combined with their fraud in falsifying my death certificate, guaranteed lengthy sentences even with plea bargains. Diana's tears in the boardroom were nothing compared to what awaited them in federal court. But the most satisfying element of my revenge was taking control of Whitfield Pharmaceuticals itself. The company my biological mother had built was being destroyed from within by Derek's embezzlement and corporate sabotage. My first act as the new majority shareholder was to order a complete financial audit that revealed the staggering scope of his theft. Marcus arranged for me to address the company's board of directors in the same boardroom where we had confronted Frank's family. This time the seats were filled with pharmaceutical executives, research scientists, and financial officers who had been unknowingly working for a criminal enterprise. Bucks, ladies and gentlemen, I began standing at the head of the table where my mother had once made decisions that saved millions of lives. My name is Carson Whitfield, and I am Emma Whitfield's son. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several board members had worked with my mother before her death, and seeing me for the first time was clearly an emotional experience. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the head of research and development, actually gasped when she saw my resemblance to the portraits on the wall. For the past 25 years, I have been hidden away while Derek Whitfield systematically looted this company and murdered members of our family. I continued. Today that ends.
I nodded to Walter, who activated the presentation screen and began displaying evidence of Derek's crimes. Bank records showing $53 million diverted from research budgets. Email correspondence revealing the sale of proprietary drug formulas to competitors. Audit reports documenting systematic theft dating back nearly a decade.
Derek Whitfield stole breakthrough cancer research and sold it to pharmaceutical companies in China. I explained as the evidence mounted. He diverted funding from diabetes treatment development to pay for his lifestyle and his murder conspiracy. He sabotaged clinical trials to benefit companies that were paying him bribes. The board members stared at the evidence in stunned silence. Dr. Chen was visibly shaking as she processed the scope of Derek's betrayal. The pancreatic cancer treatment we've been developing, she said quietly. Derek told us the funding was cut due to budget constraints. The funding was diverted to Derek's personal accounts. Marcus replied, pulling up specific financial records. $67 million that should have been used to save lives was instead used to fund a lifestyle of luxury and murder. I walked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. My mother built this company to help people to develop treatments that could eliminate suffering and save lives. Derek turned it into his personal piggy bank while people died waiting for cures we could have already developed. The transformation in the room was remarkable. These were people who had dedicated their careers to medical research, who had gone into pharmaceutical development to make the world a better place. Learning that their work had been sabotaged and their research stolen was devastating, but it also ignited a determination to fight back.
What do we do now? Asked Dr. Robert Martinez, the head of clinical trials.
Now we rebuild, I replied with conviction. We restore the funding for every research project Derek sabotaged. We rehire every scientist he fired to cover his tracks. We develop the treatments my mother dreamed of, and we make them available to people who need them regardless of their ability to pay.
Walter presented the restructuring plan we had developed during my recovery. The Carson Whitfield Foundation would be established with an initial funding of $200 million dedicated to providing free medical care for patients who couldn't afford treatment. Research and development budgets would be tripled to accelerate the development of breakthrough therapies.
But perhaps most importantly, we were implementing oversight systems that would prevent future embezzlement and ensure that every dollar was dedicated to its intended medical purpose. The board unanimously approved the restructuring, with several members volunteering to take pay cuts to increase research funding. Dr. Chen presented preliminary results from the pancreatic cancer research that Derek had claimed was failing. With proper funding, they were less than 2 years away from human clinical trials. As the meeting concluded, I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing from my entire life. Growing up, I had worked in marketing and advertising, creating campaigns to sell products that people didn't really need. Now I had the opportunity to fund research that could literally save lives and eliminate suffering for millions of people. The final piece of justice came 2 days later when Derek Whitfield was arrested during a board meeting at a competing pharmaceutical company where he was trying to sell more stolen research. FBI agents surrounded the conference room and took him into custody, while company executives realized they had been purchasing illegal intellectual property. The surveillance footage from his arrest was deeply satisfying to watch. Derek's arrogance evaporated the moment he realized his crimes had been discovered. The man who had murdered my cousins and tried to kill me broke down in tears as federal agents read him his rights. Walter called me that evening with updates on all the prosecutions. Derek would face life in prison without the possibility of parole for multiple murders. Frank received an 8-year sentence for conspiracy and fraud. Diana got 6 years for her role in falsifying my death certificate. Jake and Sarah, as minors when some of the conspiracy was planned, received probation, but lost everything they had gained from Derek's payment. More importantly, every dollar Derek had stolen was being recovered and returned to medical research. The breakthrough cancer treatments he had sabotaged were back in development with full funding. Diabetes research that could have eliminated the need for daily insulin injections was moving forward rapidly. I established scholarship programs at medical schools across the country, funding the education of students who wanted to pursue pharmaceutical research. Manufacturing facilities were being built to produce treatments at cost for patients in developing countries. Your mother would be proud, Marcus told me as we reviewed the Foundation's first quarterly report. Emma always believed that wealth was meaningless unless it was used to help others. Standing in my mother's former office looking out at the Chicago skyline, I finally understood what family really meant. It wasn't about blood relationships or financial obligations. It was about people who chose to stand by you, who fought for your well-being even when there was nothing in it for them. Walter Sterling had become the father figure I had never really had, teaching me about business and ethics with patience and wisdom. Marcus Whitfield showed me how to honor family legacy while building something new and better. Dr. Chen and the research team became my chosen family, united by a shared mission to eliminate suffering and save lives. 6 months after waking up in that empty hospital room, I stood in the lobby of the Carson Whitfield Children's Medical Center, watching young cancer patients play in the bright, cheerful space that had been designed specifically for their comfort and healing. The facility was the Foundation's flagship project, providing free treatment to children whose families couldn't afford the astronomical costs of fighting childhood cancer. Dr. Rachel Morrison, the trauma surgeon who had saved my life during those critical first weeks after the car accident, joined me at the window overlooking the children's play area. She had become much more than a medical professional in my life. She was someone who understood the value of second chances and the importance of using them wisely. Timothy Rodriguez is going home tomorrow, she told me, pointing to a 7-year-old boy building elaborate structures with colorful blocks. 6 months ago, his parents were told to prepare for the worst. Now he's cancer-free thanks to the new treatment protocol your foundation funded. The children's laughter echoed through the lobby, a sound that represented everything I had learned about the difference between existing and truly living. These kids were fighting battles that would have destroyed adults, but they faced each day with courage and hope that inspired everyone around them. Derek's final sentencing is next week. I mentioned, though, the subject felt increasingly irrelevant to the work we were doing. 25 years without parole, Rachel replied. Justice for your cousins and closure for you. Derek Whitfield had been found guilty on all counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder, embezzlement, and racketeering. The evidence Walter's team had assembled was so overwhelming that his defense attorneys had advised him to plead guilty in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Frank had been released after serving 6 months of his 8-year sentence, but his world had been completely destroyed. Diana divorced him, took half of their remaining assets, and moved to Florida with her children. Jake and Sarah wanted nothing to do with the man who had sold out their brother for money. Frank was living alone in a studio apartment, working as a night security guard, facing a future of isolation and regret. Diana herself had served 4 months before being released to a halfway house. She lost the house, the cars, and the comfortable middle-class lifestyle that had been built on my inheritance. Jake and Sarah relived being raised by their grandmother far away from the toxic environment their parents had created. The justice was complete, but more importantly, it had led to something positive and life-giving that would outlast all of us. Dr. Chen's team made another breakthrough last week. I told Rachel as we watched Timothy's parents hug him in celebration of his recovery. The new diabetes treatment could eliminate the need for insulin injections within 3 years. Rachel smiled, understanding how much these medical advances meant to me. Your mother's dream of accessible healthcare is actually becoming reality. Emma Whitfield had left detailed journals describing her vision for a pharmaceutical company that prioritized patient care over profit margins. Reading her words had been like getting to know the mother I had never met, understanding her values and her hopes for the future. Every decision I made as the head of the foundation was guided by her principles and her unwavering belief that medical knowledge belonged to humanity, not to shareholders. The financial transformation had been as dramatic as the personal one. The company's stock price had actually increased when we announced our commitment to affordable healthcare and transparent pricing. Investors realized that a pharmaceutical company with unshakable ethical standards was a better long-term investment than one built on greed and secrecy. Walter had taught me that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the positive impact those dollars could create. The Whitfield Foundation now employed over 300 researchers, doctors, and support staff dedicated to developing treatments for diseases that primarily affected the poor and underserved. I learned something important during all of this, I told Rachel as we prepared to tour the new pediatric oncology wing. I spent 25 years believing I was Carson Mitchell, the adopted son of a mechanic who struggled to pay bills and worried about money. I thought I was ordinary, unremarkable, just another person trying to get by. We walked through corridors lined with artwork created by young patients, colorful paintings that depicted their dreams for the future, becoming astronauts, teachers, artists, and doctors who would help other sick children. The truth is, I was never Carson Mitchell. I continued. I was always Carson Whitfield, heir to a legacy of healing and hope. But I had to lose everything I thought I was to discover who I really am. Rachel nodded, understanding the philosophical journey as much as the practical one. And who are you now? I'm someone who understands that betrayal can either destroy you or forge you into something stronger. I replied, stopping in front of a painting created by a 9-year-old girl who had beaten leukemia with the help of one of our new treatments. When people show you who they really are, you should believe them. I continued, thinking about Frank's willingness to sell my life for money and Derek's casual attitude toward murder. But you can't let their darkness extinguish your light. We entered the research laboratory where Dr. Chen's team was working on treatments for rare childhood diseases that affected fewer than 10,000 patients worldwide. Traditional pharmaceutical companies ignored these conditions because they weren't profitable. But the foundation saw them as opportunities to eliminate suffering regardless of financial return. True family isn't built through blood or obligation, I said, watching dedicated scientists work late into the evening on projects that would save lives. It's built through choice and love, through people who stand by you not because they have to, but because they want to. Walter Sterling was waiting for us in the laboratory, reviewing progress reports with the enthusiasm of someone who had found his true calling in life. Marcus Whitfield had become the brother I had never had, someone who understood the weight of family legacy and the importance of using it responsibly. Dr. Chen looked up from her microscope and smiled when she saw us approaching. Carson, you need to see this. We just confirmed that the new treatment is effective against the childhood brain cancer that was considered completely untreatable 6 months ago. The breakthrough represented everything my mother had dreamed of and everything I had learned about the purpose of wealth. Money was meaningless unless it was used to create something lasting and meaningful, something that would continue helping people long after we were gone. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover who you really are and what you're truly capable of becoming, I told Rachel as we reviewed the research data that would soon save children's lives around the world. The Foundation's work had expanded internationally, with treatment centers in countries where children died from diseases that were easily curable in America. The cost of providing free medical care to kids in developing nations was less than what Derek had stolen from the company in a single year. Standing in that laboratory, surrounded by people who had chosen to dedicate their lives to helping others, I finally understood what my mother had been trying to create. It wasn't just a pharmaceutical company, or a foundation, or a medical center. It was a legacy of hope that would continue growing and healing long after any of us were remembered. The journey from that empty hospital room to this moment of purpose and fulfillment had taught me that our worst experiences can become the foundation for our greatest contributions. The betrayal that nearly destroyed me had led to discoveries about family loyalty and the true meaning of wealth that I never would have learned otherwise. Frank's abandonment had hurt more than Derek's murder attempt, because I had expected love and received calculation. But losing that false sense of family had opened space for authentic relationships built on shared values and mutual respect. The next phase of research looks even more promising. Dr. Chen continued showing us preliminary data on treatments that could revolutionize how we approach genetic diseases. We're not just treating symptoms anymore. We're actually correcting the underlying genetic problems that cause these conditions. Rachel squeezed my hand as we processed the implications of this breakthrough. Children born with genetic disorders that had been fatal for centuries could now live normal, healthy lives, thanks to research funded by people who had tried to kill me for money. The irony was beautiful in its completeness. Derek's greed had led to discoveries that would save thousands of lives. Frank's betrayal had revealed the importance of chosen family over biological obligation, and my near-death experience had shown me what it meant to truly live. As we prepared to leave the medical center for the evening, I thought about the question that had haunted me during those dark days in the hospital. How could the people I trusted most be capable of such complete betrayal? The answer was simple and profound. They had never been the people I thought they were. Frank had been playing a role for 25 years, collecting payments and waiting for the opportunity to cash out. Derek had been a criminal who saw murder as a business transaction. Diana, Jake, and Sarah had been willing accomplices who prioritized money over human life. But Walter, Marcus, Rachel, and Dr. Chen were exactly who they appeared to be. People of integrity who used their talents to make the world better. The betrayal had been painful, but it had led me to find my true family and my real purpose in life. Standing in the lobby of the children's hospital watching kids who faced impossible odds with courage and determination, I realized that this was what my mother had been preparing me for my entire life. Not just to inherit money, but to understand that wealth without purpose was meaningless, that family without love was hollow, and that survival without growth was merely existence. The foundation would continue expanding. The research would lead to more breakthroughs, and thousands of children would live healthy lives because people had tried to destroy me and failed. That was the ultimate victory. Not revenge against those who had betrayed me, but transformation of their destructive actions into something life-giving and eternal. I learned that betrayal can either destroy you or forge you into something stronger. When people show you who they really are, believe them, but don't let their darkness extinguish your light. True family is built through choice and love, not blood and obligation. And sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover who you really are and what you're truly capable of becoming. Have you ever experienced a moment when losing something precious led you to discover something even more valuable? I'd love to hear about your own journey of transformation in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding purpose. And share this with anyone who needs to be reminded that their darkest moments might be preparing them for their greatest contributions. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that every ending is actually a new beginning waiting to unfold. Your story of resilience and transformation is still being written, and the best chapters may be yet to come.